At the end of 2024, I had a friend that owns a rental property reach out saying that they would need some help with starting the renovations. They were quoted that it was going to be like $50,000, $60,000 to do the basic renovations, and that would include ripping everything out. And as someone that is interested in becoming a potential landlord someday and renting out properties to people to live in, I thought it would be a great learning experience to tag along, see how much work and labor went into like the back end side of once a tenant moves out. How messy does a property get? Like, it's $50,000. Like, how expensive, how bad is the situation for it to be quoted at $50,000? And this guy is an experienced, landlord. He's had multiple properties. And I think that walking through this experience, it was enlightening in terms of it touches on mental health, on who actually gets the most benefit in terms of being like the landlord versus being the renter, what's the better situation to be in, and in terms of even for my own considerations, if I wanted to rent out a house to someone someday, this gave me a lot to think about. So strap in. I hope that you enjoy kind of like the walkthrough of what this experience was like. I think that the state of someone's house reflects the state of their mind. Like, if your head feels so overwhelmed and there's just too much going on, somehow that ends up presenting in your reality and manifesting. So if you are suddenly too overwhelmed with the grief or the loss of somebody and you're walking through your kitchen, you're probably not even going to notice the dishes or even the dirty floors. And maybe even the moment that you notice those things, it makes the grief feel worse because now you feel incapable of addressing the mess of your life on top of the overwhelming grief that got you into this place. And so if you're somebody that is doing well in life, though, I think that sometimes you can still be happy and live in a dirty, or an unorganized type of living environment. But I think that largely for the most part, having a clean environment is associated with health, and I think that can correlate to your mental health also. If you walk into someone's house, you can typically tell a lot about their lifestyle. You can tell if they read because they're going to have a lot of books in a certain area. You can tell if they cook a lot because there's going to be a high concentration of pots and pans and cooking utensils. And if somebody doesn't cook, they're typically going to have a lot of plastic eatery. They're going to have paper plates possibly. You're not going to see a lot of organized or investments into buying matching plates and dinnerware. You can tell a lot about people by their things, right? And this renter's home, this was a hoarder's house situation. And going into this, I just want to break the subject as respectfully as possible. When I discuss the mental health and the mental state of what this woman was going through, when I discuss the state of her home and her living situation, this is all coming from a point of concern and compassion. It's not coming from a place of judgment or anything else like that, like downcasting and wanting some negative action to happen upon her life for anything that's happened or anything that I witnessed. Because personally, I don't know her. I probably will never meet her. And I'll never meet her family, and if I crossed them on the streets, I wouldn't even know that it was them. And I think that for so many of people that are living in a hoarder situation, externally, if they're going to work every day, if they're going through the normal things that you would expect to see your coworkers, anybody else doing, you might not notice that, the same people that you're with every single day might actually be living in a very unsanitary and unhealthy condition. And the state of their home could actually be a reflection that they're going through something much more internal and much more painful than can be verbalized or worked through externally with strangers. So I do want to talk about this with as much compassion and respect for what this person may have been going through, because again, I don't know what she was going through. I was just there to see the after of, the several years that she was going through something. And cleaning out the house, that was the entire intention, was to help my friend clean out this house. But it inspired so much deep thought because this was somebody's life that happened in this house. And so as I share this story with you, I hope that you can be equally compassionate, and I hope this inspires you to have compassion towards the other people in your life where they may be going through mental health situations that you can't see because maybe you've never entered their house, or maybe even if their house is spotless, they have a very good way of hiding the whatever they're going through. So if you've never been into a hoarder's house, the first thing is that it is unsanitary. There are layers of debris from several years that can cause health risks to the people that are entering that home. And so we had to mask on, gloves on, try to cover as much skin as you can, and essentially just getting to work in dusty, unsanitary, filthy conditions. These tenants had paid rent perfectly for nearly 10 years, and it wasn't until we walked in that we realized that the children and the animals may have been experiencing severe neglect and possibly abuse. between the carpets being unable to just, they were completely stuck to the floor. Whatever liquid had been sitting in them soaked them through to the point that they had dissolved and become one material, had dissolved into the floor. So we were taking shovels to remove what should have been very easy to remove materials. It was carpet. It should have just been able to roll up. The foam should have just been easy to pick up. But the foam, everything had just stuck into the floor over the course of 10 years. And whatever had been spilled on the carpet, or whether it was dog waste, animal waste, human waste, it had accumulated to the point that the carpet throughout the entire house had to be shoveled out from the floor. Nearly every door in the home was broken. It was either kicked through. There was drawings on the wall. In the children's room, their door had profanity and kind of some sad things written on the door itself, which implied that, you know, whatever the children were going through was a reflection of what their mom had been going through as well. And it's just sad to see that the trauma, that whatever the mom was going through, whether it was grief that caused the hoarding environment, or whether it was she was in her own pain, whatever she may have been going through, that obviously was translating onto her children, because the children's rooms were in extreme depraved states. There was drawing on the wall. There was feces on the wall. The carpet was in the same horrible state. There was, a lot of writing of self-loathing, and to see that it was children's writing was very concerning, because to be that young with that type of handwriting denotes that they were probably told these things from somebody else. For 10 years, they were perfect tenants. They paid rent on time. They were never late. There was never any problems. And it wasn't until we walked into the house and kind of saw everything that we realized that there was a very interesting story that could only be walked through from the present backwards. It could only be told that way because when you walked into the home, everything that was on the surface was essentially things that were more recent, and everything at the bottom was accumulated from, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, from when they had first moved into the house. But over the course of the 10 years, and as the piles had started to accumulate, you could tell there was a massive shift in priority. At one point, when they had first moved into this house, you could tell that the priority for this tenant, for this woman, was her children. She had paintings that she had done with her kids. Like, there was multiple paintings that were of different skills and styles. There was an easel, there was paint kits, there was books and tons of toys. And as the pile started to grow, it became more garbage and clothes and honestly trash, as if they had never taken the trash fully out of their house. There was a big pool in the backyard. When the landlord had initially purchased it, it was clear blue. It was perfect for swimming and absolutely healthy. And now it was bone dry and full to the brim with trash. It was just sad to witness that it was years of decision making that kind of resulted into the state of the home that we walked into. And really, like, whatever the mom was going through to allow the environment for her children to get so bad and unhealthy, it passed the trauma onto her children, and possibly, most likely it was unintentional. She didn't want her kids to be as traumatized and to feel whatever she was feeling, but sometimes just by the nature of being a human being, like, you can't help the trauma and the pain that someone else in the world will exact on you. And so unfortunately it was between like this family that there was so much difficulty emotionally. And it really makes you wonder how full her mind must have been in order for her house to get into this state. Like, was it really grief, or was it a trauma that she went through? But whatever the source of it was something that was so painful that she thought that whatever happened to her during that 10 years time span that she was living there, it must have been so painful that it ultimately caused her to have complete disregard for her kids, to have complete disregard for her home and her living situation. And again, these are only assumptions. I can't assume like what her mental state must have been, but kind of the whole example of, if you're grief, if you're in a depressive state and you're walking through your home, a lot of these things that would normally be easy tasks, like do the dishes, throw the clothes into the dryer, those things start to become, you're blind to them, especially when you're in a depressive state and an unhealthy mental state. And so it's just sad to see that there were kids living in those conditions as well. And I think that there's really two popular philosophies that drive our inner bias. There's the frame of mind where I am responsible for all the good and the bad in my life. And there's the other popular philosophy of I didn't ask to be born, so why should I be responsible for anything that happens in the world? And I think that under the philosophy where you take responsibility and ownership of your life, it means that you can recognize that there's a correlation between your efforts and the good that comes out of them. Oftentimes, taking responsibility isn't the easy thing to do. And oftentimes, whatever responsibility was dumped on you, you didn't ask for, you didn't want it in the first place, but hey, now it's in front of you and it has to be done. And I think that oftentimes for the people that embrace those responsibilities, whether they ask for them or not, they face life with this embrace of, I can take this on, I can handle this, and it grows confidence as you kind of navigate these challenges you experience in life of just, this bring it on type of attitude versus pushing away of like, I didn't want to deal with it in the first place. I never asked for this. And I don't know where this woman's state of mind was at, but if there was a point where she was coherent enough to make the decision between the two philosophies of, do I want to take responsibility or do I choose not to take responsibility? If she ever had a moment to choose, I think that in those moments of coherence, she probably chose not to take responsibility, because I think it would have meant a lot more work. It would have been an extreme amount of effort in order to change what has been happening over the past 10 years in order to, when they call it work in therapy, they're not kidding. It's actual work. And you have to be willing to do the hard things in order to make your life better. And the severe state of her home when we had entered it was a reflection of several years of decision making. And it was an accumulation of almost choosing. Maybe it was choosing. That's the hard measurement, right? We can't tell if it was by choice or if it was just something that was happening in the condition of her mind. But it was like at some point, you have the ability to choose. Am I going to get help? Am I going to do something different? And even though, I think surface level, maybe she thought she was fine because the bills are paid, I think having the bills paid is only one gauge, one measurement for doing well in life. And I think when you don't take responsibility, the first thing in your mind is your brain becomes geared to pursue shortcuts. And I think that for a lot of us who have realized shortcuts often come with a lot of pain. They come with like learning lessons, because sometimes there are things in life that you can't circumvent. You can't circumvent grief. You just have to go through it. You have to put the work and thought and emotion, everything behind going through that grief, or like being a parent. Like, it's a lot of things aren't passive activities, and it's hard to push yourself through a lot of it. But I think that taking responsibility where you can and avoiding just the mental habit of looking to do something quick and easy and make it painless every time. You can't always avoid pain. I think that's kind of the nature of being a human being sometimes, is like, yeah, I'm in pain, and embracing it and working on it. And I think that that's okay, but when you kind of push the pain down so deeply that you're hurting other people and maybe you don't even realize it, and these are people that are supposed to be important to you. She was going through something. She really was. And so I think that at least addressing this portion of the story is to say that mental health is a slippery slope. We can't really see it externally on a lot of people. I think that for any of us, it almost makes you wonder, could you lose somebody that is so important to you? Could you go through something that's so painful and traumatic that it makes you feel depressed, or it makes you, check out of life, and it ultimately causes you to cause pain to other people? And then that's usually how it works. A lot of times, trauma is passed on unintentionally, but somebody in the line has to take responsibility to fix things. And so I bring that up because personally, if I had met her, I wouldn't know how to help her. I wouldn't know what to say to a total stranger externally if I found out that they were living in these circumstances. Like, you can't shame them and tell them that their way of living is wrong. You can't, force somebody that doesn't want to get help to get help. If I did see kids living in that condition, it was just like, it's not for me to decide whether, it's right for kids to stay with their mom or if kids should be in like a safer living condition. Like, I'm definitely not qualified to determine any of those things. And so it's like, it's a really hard situation to navigate. Life is a hard situation to navigate. And I could only see externally what this woman was going through and what she was trying to navigate. And I guess that just the personal note, like the public announcement for everybody that's heard this story, is to just keep a pulse on the people you care about, because you don't know how small, like, you might hear that they have a loss and you might not realize the weight of that loss on them emotionally, mentally. They lose their job. You don't know what someone's going through and how something some life event might weigh on them heavier than another one. So just try to be there for your people. Make sure you reach out to them and let them know that you're there and you support them and that you're there to help them no matter what they're going through. So that's the mental health note. That's where I can leave it at. So moving the story over to a financial perspective, the tenant had not missed rent in 9 years, and it wasn't until the tenant had called the landlord essentially saying they were not getting water into their house anymore, that they needed a plumber to come out. So the landlord calls the plumber to come out, and the plumber fixes whatever he needed to fix, and he calls the landlord back, lets him know, like, hey, it's done, but I think that you should come and check out the property. So the landlord's like, well, what's going on? The landlord's like, the plumber says, I think you just need to come down and see it yourself. So landlord comes down, that triggers the inspection, and when he realizes the state that his rental property is in, that he was good to trigger the eviction with that. And so it took around 30 to 60 days, but and we're in the state of Nevada, and so evictions process much faster in this state, but the tenant was evicted. There was opportunities where she was able to go to court and, file for extensions, so there was extended periods in there. After the tenant was out, the owner was quoted $60,000 in repairs, so we went over there to help with the removal and disposal, and it was to just save money on the back end for when the actual contracting team would get in and start installing everything. It would save a lot of money up front to just not even have to deal with the disposal. You save time on labor, the costs, all of that. But let's say that the landlord was profiting $500 off of this property, and that's after insurance, that's after taxes. So if you take $500 times 12 months, that means that he was making $6,000 a year in profit, passive income, off of this property. So $6,000 per year. If you take the $6,000 and multiply it across the 10 years that the tenant was living there, then that means in total he would have made $60,000 in profit. That $60,000 is essentially the same thing he would have paid in order to renovate it, just to get it back to the point that it is rentable to another tenant. And so I think that kind of opens up the conversation of, is it actually profitable to rent out a real estate property? Because just with those numbers, if all of his profit is just going to fixing it after a tenant moves out, then where is the actual profit, right? So I try to break it down, and I try to think about all the different elements that, played into this rental situation, and how much, as a landlord, does he have any protections? Can he get more money back from this? And is real estate that great of an investment, especially if you're looking for passive income? So of course, the first thing is that the landlord has the right to sue for these damages, and while he isn't sure if he will sue or not, the next concern would be if they could even collect on it. And even if the judge were to agree that he could collect the money for these damages, then it's not even 100% sure that she would be paying them, and then would he have to hire somebody to go through the process of actually pursuing and collecting them? So he ran it, so there's a lot of limitations, even though, off of face value, we might think that the landlord always has the most benefit, most protection, and the most privilege in the situation. I think that in this particular one, for me, it was showing that there is a lot of risk that goes into being a landlord that I may not have assessed before. So there are some benefits that the landlord gets in this situation, right? When you're the landlord and you're renting out a property, you have tax write-offs and deductions like depreciation that you can use, that kind of, when you're filing your taxes, that would reduce how much you would have to pay in taxes on your income. The other benefit is insurance. So most of us would think that the insurance should be able to cover all those damages, right? Like if you're the landlord and I'm paying, for insurance on a property, then if my tenant moves out and they leave it all damaged, then I should be able to have my insurance cover it, right? I found out that's not generally how it works. Most of the time, landlords actually have a type of insurance that's called liability coverage. And this is usually if in a scenario where the tenant has an accident on the property. Let's say that they slip and fall in the bathtub, and they say that the material you use for the bathtub is the issue, and so they try to sue you for it. The insurance that typically a landlord is paying for on a house is for the purpose of protecting themselves in a lawsuit. And then some policies also have loss of rental income, which would be similar to this one right here, where if the tenant moves out, you're not able to collect rent because the house is in such disrepair, then this type of insurance policy would at least pay you the rent and cover the rent while you work on getting it up to a rentable standard. But unless you had paid for that specific type of insurance, then, and sometimes it's not even offered on all types of property or on all types of states or in all states, you may only be compensated through an insurance, through these certain avenues. And it seems like for me, what was eye-opening was that insurance, if you are a landlord, does not do much to insure you and protect you. It's really just about if there's a lawsuit. So it's very limiting. That's what I learned. The third benefit in owning real estate is the appreciation in property value. And I think that this is the easiest one to kind of quantify behind everything. There's this invisible money in equity. And even though the landlord has this invisible money in the equity, he can't access the appreciation of his house unless he sells it or takes it out as a form of debt, which is using the house as a collateral. And if there was $100,000 of equity in the house, for example, the landlord could pull up to 75% of that as a line of credit or a HELOC, and he would have to pay for that with interest. So it's a cheaper interest when you're using the home as a collateral in a HELOC situation because there's collateral. But, just to rent out or to borrow straight out $50,000 without collateral would be a really fat interest rate. And so you're lowering your interest rate just a little bit by having that tool of home equity. But again, you're increasing your risk. So it's debt on debt. And it's just something to consider that, even though we might think that, the value of this house is great, he should be able to cover all of it, or he has insurance. I don't think that, being a landlord, especially if I was in his situation and that was my first rental property, I would be having a meltdown 10 years later, because say that, it took so long just to acquire a second house and to rent out that other house, that by the time that you're at this point that you have to fork out another $50,000 in order to just get it repairable again, now it's become a liability. Now you're throwing money at this house that's not making you any income, and you're just waiting to get to a point where it is something that can profit. And yeah, it's being a landlord and trying to, either fix and flip or rent out a property. It's not as cut and dry as I think everybody on the internet makes it sound. And I wanted to share this story because it was eye-opening for me. I'm sure it'll be eye-opening for anybody else that hears it, because I think that the job of being a landlord is one of extreme responsibility, because you're supposed to create these safe living conditions, right? But with responsibility, comes the risk of taking responsibility. And even though he has the capacity to be earning, $60,000 over the course of 10 years in passive income, well, there's also the extreme risk that your tenant can do $60,000 worth of damages within that same time frame. And I think that, just in conclusion, this has given me a lot to consider towards my future if I ever wanted to rent out real estate. So I think for me, this took some of the pressure off of wanting to buy another real estate investment property sooner than later. With how much we saw the change of home pricing from 2020 to now, I think that it gave my entire generation a lot more confidence in real estate. We all wanted to buy a house, but I think that actually walking through kind of these realizations of how much more expensive it is now to maintain a house, the risks that come with being a landlord, especially during a time where maybe a lot of people aren't rentable worthy, or I don't know, there's so much to learn here in this space. But I think that just seeing a worst case scenario actually play out before my eyes helped me cool off the fans a bit on wanting to pursue real estate. And I'm okay with just doing my, ETF or index investing for now, maybe focusing on stocks more. But either way, currently my existing strategy is to just keep stacking up cash, because if there is a buying opportunity, and it's hard to tell nowadays because there is so much just different information going in opposite directions. You're seeing market information saying that we're low on jobs, but then you're also seeing that, inflation's cooling, inflation's rising, and it's hard to tell where exactly we are or where things are going. All I'm doing is just stacking up cash and just trying to create a more secure position by not taking any extreme risks that I don't have to be taking right now. So yeah, that's kind of my investing strategy at the moment. I'm absolutely going to grow my real estate portfolio with time, but this was definitely a learning experience that I hope you could take something away from. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. This took a little bit of time to finally get back into the tune of making a YouTube video again. But if you've watched this, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you leave today and go have a great humanitarian conversation with somebody, and you show them that you care about them. So yeah, just keep an eye on your loved ones. I hope that you have all the success this year, and thank you for watching.